Hi, welcome to Brown Girl Book Lover. I'm here with Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, and we're talking about his beautiful novel, Chain-Gang All-Stars. I'm going to read you a brief bio. Mr. Nana, the King, is the New York Times bestselling author of Friday Black. Originally from Spring Valley, New York, he graduated from SUNY Albany and went to receive his MFA from Syracuse University. His work has appeared or is forthcoming from numerous publications, including the New York Times Book Review, Esquire, Literary Hub, the Paris Review, and Long Reads. He was selected by Colson Whitehead as National Foundation's 5 Under 5 honorees. He is the winner of the Penn Gene Stein Book Award and a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle for his best first book and the Aspen World Literary Prize. He's also one of the most stylish writers.
I appreciate that. If you say so, I mean, I'm going to take your word for it.
You and Michelle Jackson, you guys be styling. Welcome to Brown Girl Book Lover, Nana. I am
so grateful to be here. Thank you. It's my honor.
Yay. Tell us about Chain-Gang All-Stars.
Yep. So Chain-Gang All-Stars is my second book. It's a novel about imagined future in which convicted wards of state can opt out of a sentence of at least 25 years and participate in death matches. Excuse me. It's very interested in like the carceral state and prison, and it's like an imagining that really thinks about what the world is when we fully embrace the violence that is the prison system as it is now. And within that world, we're focusing particularly on a woman named Loretta Thurwar, another named Amara Hurricane Stacker, which is two women who are basically the top dogs in this blood sport.
And, you said that it's like from a distant future, but when I read this book, I feel like this is now, this is present.
Yeah, I meant to say an imagined future. Sorry. And it's a lot of it is exactly right now. Like the heart of it is exactly now.
Yeah.
Right now, we currently live in a country that where there is no federal ban on capital punishment, meaning the government can murder you or anyone or whoever it decides to. We live in a country where slavery is explicitly protected by the Constitution, as we know with the 13th Amendment. Which, I mean, those two facts alone are the bridge to any type of treatment. We know that there's corporate interest involved in prisons and board members and stockholders who benefit directly from not just prison labor, but prisons themselves. It's for private prisons. And so all these facts, and even before we get into the racism of the prison system, the way it particularly targets the LGBTQIA community, the way, and even within that community, the trans community specifically targeted, even without that stuff, prisons aren't doing what they should do, which is supposed to be rehabilitate. They're really punitive and they are spaces of violence. And the book is really trying to explore how pervasive that violence is.
Your book indicts us in many ways, but like in two ways that I see is that it indicts us that like, because we're accustomed to people being incarcerated and people being dying, right? Death penalty.
Yeah.
We are all indicted in that, right? It's a failure of the system that we're all part of for this to happen, for like private prisons to happen, for like people to be incarcerated for over 30 years, right? For like kids to be in prison. This is an it indicts us as a society. We're all part of it. Yeah. But also it makes me think about like the fact that we are the society is indicting someone for a crime, let's say murder, right? But then in prison, they're like indicting them for murder. But then in prison, they're going through the harshness of what happened. So it's like, it's like I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about this book because this is the work I do every day.
Yeah.
And it's like we are indicted in this system, but we don't see that. We create this distance.
Yeah. And the system requires, like, it's not like all for me, like programs like yours are like sort of a like a light in the middle of this darkness. But the system at large, it's this, to me, it's like an Ouroboros type thing that eats itself. So what, to me, it's like we have a patriarchal, violent, hegemonic society, like, you know, and then and as a result, patriarchal, violent uh institution has arisen to solve the problem. But really, it's like almost like the way like the ego will protect itself in like your person. That's like this is like a social version of it. Whereas rather than having to address like the reality of this violent patriarchal world we have this system that eats individuals and also does the double duty of making us feel like the issue has been addressed without ever having to really interrogate itself. And so it's this like scary thing because it feels good in this real way to feel like we have this place. It's like safe, like it's like a safety thing. Oh, the world is scary and dangerous. We need this scary and dangerous thing to fix it. But sort of the argument I'm sort of trying to make, I guess, like explicitly and implicitly, is like the world does not have to be so scary and violent. But it's really hard to get to that place when all we know is horror and violence.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about your characters because this is the first novel I've encountered with so many characters like appearing and reappearing, sometimes not appearing. How did you build this entire world and why was it important for you as the writer to include so many characters in this narrative?
So yeah, how did I do it? Painstakingly. It was just so hard for so long. I knew I needed a lot of characters because the prison system is so multifaceted. The carceral state is so multifaceted. Our feelings as a society, as community, as a society, as a country, as a global community about harm are so varied, and there's so much nuance to discuss when thinking about the issue of doing harm and addressing the doing of harm, that it just required a lot of points of view because the issue is obviously gendered, it's obviously racialized. What type of, like, there's so many paradigms of existence to which that add to the complexity of the conversation. There's obviously economic considerations. There's just general, like, pure philosophical, moral, ethical considerations. There's like politics in a more like general sense. Everything I've described is just politics, but it's like general political like conversations to be had within it. There's a long history.
I've been thinking about this through my work is about like what is forgiveness and how do we build in forgiveness into our society when someone in our society have done harm in terms of murder, in terms of violence, in terms of rape. And reading this book makes me think about that again. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it means. And like, can you tell us what is forgiveness to you, especially in a community someone in our community have done harm, and how do we bring them into the fold?
Right. So it's a super important question. I think that forgiveness first requires like really looking at someone,
Mm.
really, really looking at them and their story and their history. Um, when you see, like, you talked about a 13-year-old, but like maybe it's like, say, like someone a lot older, they come from somewhere. They are afforded certain potentials. I don't think any of us would say like this life is just easy. And many of us like live in a space of great, great, great privilege, you know. And so first looking and considering those things. Also, like, so that just feels like a very important first step. Next, to me, it's like the forgiveness part is like, because like there's a personalized aspect to that, like the meaning on the part of the person who's been aggressed, the person who harm has been done to most directly. But I think a big part of like my approach to it is also remembering that like when community exists, your harm is my harm too. Like, you know, and so it's like sort of banding together and being like, okay, so like this person has done this thing to this person, and we're gonna honor this pain that has been made, someone has been made to feel. And for the person who was the one forgiving, or like me, the primary one who's been aggressed, I think it's important for them to be given the space to not immediately forgive, to work through whatever they need to get to. But sort of, I think that at the heart of it is this idea, for me, the idea that we're sort of in a group, we're in a team, we're in the same boat. Sometimes literally, but like figuratively, we're in the same boat. And it's in my interest to, when someone does something I don't like, to try my best to see them fully as human and know that they are owning goal was not to harm me, or at least even if it was, at some point that something changed. So for me, the forgiveness piece is about growing my ability to hold grace for someone, even if they've harmed me, with the idea that they kind of are me.
So in Chain Gang, you're teaching us, like Junot Diaz in A Brief and Wondrous Life, how to read, and that how closely fiction and nonfiction are.
Yeah.
Tell us about this.
So I mean, we both those books you mentioned use footnotes,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think for me. I'm really interested in like that distinction, like realism versus speculative or surreal, and then also nonfiction versus fiction. This book cites a lot of case law and constitutional law, or just straight up constitution and historical facts to sort of, I don't know, hammer home points. And that just felt important to me because I just wanted it to be impossible to divorce what this book is about from what it's about. Because there's a version where someone could read this book and be like, oh, yeah, it's about a woman with a hammer and she kills people. And that's like my worst fear, that someone just has. So I wanted to like put the history, the very bleak and dark history of the American carceral state, which is on that bleak and dark history, which is ongoing, and make it almost impossible. I mean, you could do it if you just like totally shredded the book up, but make it almost impossible, or at least very difficult, to divorce this meaning and this like idea from this book as it exists, because there's a lot of action and it's placed in this like sort of context that could feel very far off. But I want to make clear that no, there's a lot of horror right here where we're standing today. There has been for a long time.
It's, in a way, you're going against, like, that very like MFA writerly thing of like being subtle, right? I was talking to this poet, Aria D. Matthews, and she was like, subtlety is about privilege, right? I'm not going to be subtle.
The subtlety thing is it's such an interesting thing, because I remember being an MFA. I did do that MFA thing too. And I remember one time a writer said, oh, I really wanted to be subtle. And the professor was like, yeah, you and everybody else, like everybody wants to be subtle. And subtlety in what aspect? I can be subtle in like in the way these characters are withholding or not withholding some emotional reality, but I don't have to be coy or like wink wink about the fact that America incarcerates more people per capita than any other so-called advanced democracy. I don't see the point of being subtle about that. It's like, because sometimes the subtlety is a euphemism in itself. And and euphemism, I think one of the things in my work, there's a lot of ways that euphemism, as we see through like corporate speak and government speak, can be a real erasure and violence.
Yeah.
And so I try my best to, because there is a point in power to subtlety, and like when it's useful, but I don't default to it as a virtue. It's it can be very useful in many contexts, and sometimes it's not useful.
Yeah. You were just talking about your bigger purpose of the book. What is like two of your purposes?
Yeah. I think that I mean again there's many, but I think one is to I think as a writer generally, I think part of what I'm supposed to be doing is to help make compassion like a standard. Be
Mm.
part of that like sort of choir of people that remind us that we can do that. And then another piece is to remind people that the world can be anything and that you can imagine something much better than what's in front of us. I think we're sort of resigned to just sort of accept, but I really hope that in reading a book like this, you might one become more aware of what it is that we're accepting, and then as a result, just be motivated to reject that acceptance and imagine towards something better.
Yeah. We have to implore a radical imagination
Exactly.
for a better world, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Nana, my God, thank you so much for talking to me about your book. I really, really appreciate the writing. I appreciate the ideas that you're bringing forward. And it's a book that sits so, so close to home.
It means a lot to me that you would read it at all, but feel anything from it. And I'm really grateful to that you let me have this time with you today.
Yeah. And we have to talk about you coming to Bard.
I'm gonna give you my email or whatever right after this because I would love to.
Yeah. It would be great for you to come and just talk to our students. They would be very receptive. So
I'd be extremely excited to do it.
thank you so much.
I appreciate what you're doing. And now we're friends, so look at us now.
Yeah. Hey.